So look, the leadership thing or the personality thing is a part of this, but Dennis Schroeder has been brought in because they think he can play a role on this team. That's a guy who played 30 minutes a game last year. Yeah, on a Lakers team that was kind of thin and kind of mediocre in the regular season, but one that went to the Western Conference Finals, and Dennis Schroeder was a pretty big part of that team. So I think you're looking for a couple different things from him. Certainly, you're not looking for, even though Dennis Schroeder and Darko Rajakovic have a relationship back to their time in OKC together, which were arguably the best, two of the best 3 years of Dennis Schroeder's career, statistically and role wise. You're not looking for that version of him. You're looking for something that is closer to the Lakers version of him, which is, yes, secondary scoring. Last year was the first time he really was ever stationed in the corner as a shooter all that often. Not a particularly great 3-point shooter, but I think that speaks to, he came off the ball a little bit more than he had been used to in his career. And yeah, so some of that secondary scoring. And the biggest thing offensively, I think, is, a guy who can get you into your sets with some real pace, even if it's not in transition necessarily. And I wonder, Will, what you've seen of Dennis Schroeder so far, what you remember from Dennis Schroeder in previous stops, just how big is, obviously when we think of speed, I think most people first picture transition play, right?
Yeah.
But in the half court, that quick burst can be really important as well. How can that help the Raptors?
Well, I think number one, what you're talking about, getting into their offense quicker is going to be a huge part of what he brings. I mean, just even crossing half court, even having the urgency to sort of play quickly. And then when you're running through your sets, you can drop a great play all you want, but if your players aren't going through it quickly with some purpose, with some punch, it's not going to happen. And I feel like watching him run point, at least so far in preseason, there is that drive, there is that verve. I think with Dennis in particular, especially with his quickness, I mean, we're talking about mostly getting downhill. He has that ability to come off that screen and turn the corner and not even, he's not that tall. I mean, even standing beside him, I might be slightly taller than him, but he has this ability to really stretch and get to sort of angles where he's able to play it off the glass. I think that probably hurts his efficiency in a slight bit, just in the sense that he's always sort of stretching to the finish rather than sort of always getting to his spots. But we've even seen it occasionally in preseason. He hasn't really been all that aggressive with his own offense, but in the times where he has, he's been able to get to the rim a decent amount. We saw him pull out a really nice rondo fake in the Cans game where there's, I don't know, somebody on the Cans team was really pressuring Dennis. And
somebody.
I think it was Patrick Miller. Fine.
Yeah.
Patrick Miller was,
well, it was him or Alfred Payton.
It was the Eric Bledsoe clone was pressing Dennis really, really hard. And Dennis just put it calmly behind his back a couple of times and then took him all the way to the basket. And because the guy was trying to chase so hard to keep up with him, when Dennis pulled the brakes and did the rondo fake, the guy just went flying. Unfortunately, Dennis missed the turnaround little jump hook, but still, there is a craft to his game. I like seeing the angles that he's been playing with his passing as well. There's been a lot of bounce passing from him so far. But I am a little bit curious because he did say today, literally probably 30 minutes ago now, he said the preseason doesn't mean anything at all. So I do wonder sort of what we've seen so far in 3 games. Is that going to be exactly reflective of sort of what we can expect for the season? Because there have been kind of 2 versions of Dennis in the NBA, right? There's been a scoring 6-man type of Dennis, and then there's been sort of more floor general, playing defense and sort of getting off the ball Dennis.
So let me ask you then. I think we are going to see more of the number 2 version of Dennis Schroeder there. I don't think the Raptors brought him in to play a huge offensive role. We kicked around the prop the other day would he even have 20% usage, which is league average. He's only been below it twice in his rookie year and then last year with the Lakers. But you and Alex both took the slight under on that one, that he probably has a little less usage than he's been used to and more in line with what he did with the Lakers. Now, one of the benefits of carrying less usage generally is that's an opportunity to be more efficient. The shots you were taking are easier shots or they're not necessarily self-created. I wonder how you think that might play out, because he is a guy who gets to the rim and that short kind of floater range area a little better than average for a point guard or a combo guard. Not a great finisher there, but he does do a pretty good job drawing free throws historically as well. I think a lot of times when we think of what a guy's role is going to look like scaled back, we think, okay, well, less self-creation and more, catch and shoot threes, where he's not a great 3-point shooter, but he shot 35% on catch and shoots last year.
Yeah.
But I do think that some of his offensive opportunities are still going to come from attacking a defense and trying to get into the paint. Could you see an uptick in his efficiency around the rim and at the free throw line even though that, historically has not been an area that he finishes super well?
I find that a little bit difficult just because, I mean, first off, you can't really compare efficiency just at face value
Right.
between different roles, right? Across different roles. And I think for a guy like Dennis, he's going to be creating a lot of his own offense, especially when we're talking about attacking off the dribble. I'm sure there's other ways to sort of get him open as well. But for the most part, especially in the half court, if he's going to get to the basket, it's going to be because he's, taking that initiative to beat his man and get to the hoop. And I do think there's going to be less spacing here than there was with the Lakers. Now, of course, the Lakers also started last season with like some of the worst 3-point shooting you've ever seen, like worse than the Raptors last season. But by the season's end, especially in the playoff run, they were able to add a lot more shooters. Austin Reeves, who Dennis loves bringing up Austin Reeves every conversation. He brought up him again today. He talked about how he loves Austin Reeves because Austin used to always come up and say hi to his kids and his family and stuff. So,
yeah, I mean, that was a team that was playing LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Russell Westbrook and Patrick Beverly like good minutes.
yeah, what was Rob Pelinka cooking? But then again, he did cook in the second half when he got in a guy like Rui Hachimura, who felt like he made every jumper for the Lakers. After joining them from the Wizards, and also Austin Reeves got more empowered. I mean, even bringing a guy like D'Angelo Russell, I know he didn't really necessarily shoot that great, but
Jared Vanderbilt,
more of a shooter. I mean, Vanderbilt, a little iffy, but still.
I mean, look, Rui and Vanderbilt both shot 30% on threes, and it still felt like it added spacing to that team.
Yeah, right. Well, so they were really deficient. But I mean, at the same time, I do feel like for Dennis, like coming to Toronto, there's not going to be as much space in terms of stretching the floor for him. But I think what he's going to do to adjust to that is just become more of a playmaker and even increase the sort of catch and shoot opportunities. He already wasn't really much of a pull up shooter. Last year, he only took 0.5 pull up threes per game and 2.7 pull up twos per game. So he actually does a fair amount of mid range pull ups or those little floaters that you're sort of mentioning. But in terms of the threes, I mean, most of the threes, 2.8 per game versus 0.5. 2.8 were the catch and shoot type.
Is what, 35% and change?
That was 35. Now, maybe that can get a little bit higher. But ultimately, that's sort of where you would like to see his role be more efficient. But to me, it's not necessarily about his individual efficiency. It's about how he's able to sort of set up the offense and help the efficiency of his teammates. Because that's what I feel like the point guard position needs to be right now for the Raptors.
It does. And it's going to be an interesting challenge for Dennis Schröder because you look at some of his career stats and the assist numbers really stand out, right? And the assist percentage. But those were also times where, in Atlanta and to a lesser extent in OKC, he had the ball a ton. So, cleaning the glass has a stat where they adjust your assist rate for your overall usage. So how much are you passing relative to how much you have the ball?
Right.
And he's always been a little below average for a point guard or even a combo guard in that regard. So the challenge for him is not necessarily that he's capable of passing. It's finding that right mix of when do I pass, when do I shoot? And I think that is probably the one thing that we are going to see from Dennis Schröder that is most atypical with what his career has been to this point is, I think this is going to be for the first time, really, other than maybe those couple minutes he spent in Houston the other year, you are a pass first point guard rather than a scoring point guard who can also pass. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And my question to you there is, do you think that was an intentional part by the Raptors? Because when they obviously Fred left, and depending on sort of what you believe in terms of the reports and all that kind of stuff, the Raptors tried to keep him, but obviously weren't able to come anywhere close to what Houston was offering. So they must have had to figure out a plan B in terms of, okay, what do we want to do with the point guard position now? And there were several sort of like mid-level tier point guards available at that time, and the Raptors obviously chose to go with Dennis. Do you think that was intentional, though, that they wanted to go with more of a sort of pass-first, defense-first kind of point guard rather than someone who's more of a scorer? Let's say like a Gabe Vincent, for example, who ultimately went to the Lakers, actually took Dennis's old job, essentially.
Yeah, I think they probably would have preferred, honestly, someone who had a little bit more shooting in their game. I just think that it's such an at-need skill right now with this team still. But yeah, that can be expensive, right? Like Gabe Vincent got a little less money than Dennis Schröder on a per year basis, but he got more term. Dante DiVincenzo got about the same deal, but twice as long. So if you're looking at, and obviously,
he's not even a point guard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just filtering by guards here. Like Max Strus is not a point guard either, but he got, significantly more than Dennis Schröder. And that's basically what the market looked like. Like you didn't have the cap space and the money to get into a D'Angelo Russell type, and you didn't want to reach down as far as a Javon Carter type. It was a really thin point guard class, which is how Fred VanVleet ends up getting $43 million a year, right?
He might have got more money than the rest of the point guards combined.
Yeah. So, you know, I think they would have preferred to have a little bit more shooting out of whoever they sign there. And I think that's probably something they've challenged Dennis with, getting better in that regard, obviously. But I think, look, there are some boxes he checks that suit what this team is trying to do. The pace in the half court, the secondary, not even secondary playmaking, because he's a point guard, just not a 10 assist a game point guard. So that's an important thing. I think there's a lot to like about the defense, especially if this is a team that isn't going to want to switch quite as much. He uses his length well, whether going under or chasing over top. He's not always the most locked in defensively, but you see everyone, I'm sure, remembers highlights over the years of him giving point guards fits by getting up in the jersey. I think maybe you just have to like get him mad first or something like that to get him like that.
Maybe
all the time.
OG flips him before every game.
Yeah. So I don't think it's, look, the reality is you had only the mid-level exception to shop with. Dennis Schröder on a 2-year mid-level exception deal is very good value. And that, I think, won out more than, this guy is the very best fit of any point guard available. There just weren't that many point guards available. And if you wanted to go for, fit over overall talent, you were then shopping in a significantly lower tier. So this one, I mean, you could address that by trade or something like that as well. But I think Schröder just, kind of right spot, right time. And it's not, it's not the most perfect snap him into the Fred role fit, but the value there is really good. And, I think we both expect they're going to tweak a lot of things anyway. I mean, it's going to be good. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be pretty good.
Part of me does wonder, what is the long-term future at point guard? Because, we're talking about Dennis. He's 30. He's here on a 2-year deal. I think he can do the job right now. But I mean, I do wonder in terms of long-term who it is, because I don't think there's many point guards in the pipeline even who have the ability to potentially start. If everything pans out for Malachi, for example, he's going to be good off the bench. Or, same thing to a lesser degree to Jeff Doughton if he stays, or Javon Freeman-Liberty, guys like that. But realistically, I don't know what that long-term future looks like. But I also think that one thing that you put in these notes that I thought was really interesting, I want to get to it before the break, was just, you think there's any chance that the Raptors change course over the course of the season and flip the starting lineup around, and they put Gary in to the starting group and they put Dennis off the bench? Because to me, it seems like the more Malachi, if Malachi struggles, or, again, I want to give him that chance. I think the team is going to give him that chance. But let's say a month, 2 months in, he's really struggling that backup point guard position. You have a guard off the bench that you can start, that can slot with your starters. And then you can have Dennis, who has been a really good second unit bench guard, and that could fix your problem. So I am curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's something that they should keep in the mix, right? Like how much have we learned over the last couple of years that you got to be flexible with your starting lineup because stuff happens, right? And I think we should see that as a matter of trying new things. Now, they haven't run that basically at all in the preseason to hear Gary.
Plan A is to do what we're doing right now. Yeah.
Role wise, Dennis Schröder as a lead bench guard who takes on a little bit more scoring makes sense, right? And that's probably part of the draw here too, is that they think he can adjust to this kind of fifth starter role, but also if it comes to it, whether it's via substitution pattern or having him come off the bench, he's shown for most of his career that he can be a really effective second unit lead scorer. So I think that's a possibility. I think the answer to whether the Raptors go that route with Gary and what the long-term plan at point guard is, they both have a little bit to do with how Scotty Barnes develops with the ball in his hands this year. Now, I don't think we're going to reach the point this year where Scotty Barnes is a quote-unquote full-time point guard and he's initiating every set and averaging 8 assists a game. Like, I don't think that's there yet. But if we're starting to see more of the growth that we're anticipating, especially in that, the transition playmaking's there, but if we're starting to see more growth in the half-court playmaking, things like that, you can live a little bit more without having a natural point guard on the floor. The issue with handing that to Scotty right now and Gary Trent being in the starting lineup is you would, get better spacing, but you would sacrifice, hey, 6 seconds left on the clock, sideline out of bounds. We need to get the ball into a safe pair of hands that we know can create something, someone who can bring the ball up the floor against pressure and things like that. Scotty and Pascal Pascal's probably capable of doing some of that. Scotty's probably going to grow into that, but the timeline on which that growth is happening probably informs some of this. And you can almost think of Dennis Schröder as a bridge guy, right? In terms of the Raptors can't know yet exactly how Scotty is going to develop as a ball handler and whether that necessitates, does that top out at a spot where you need a true point guard next to him? Does that get to a spot where you can get someone who's like a 4 assist a game kind of guy, but offers more off the ball juice around Scotty and Pascal if Pascal's still here? I think Dennis buys you some time to figure that out developmentally.